People don't laugh because they know the truth. They laugh because they think they've already figured you out. On a chilly Saturday morning in a fading industrial corner outside Columbus, Ohio, Ethan Carter pulled his aging pickup truck into the cracked parking lot of a forgotten garage that had just become his. The weathered building had peeling paint, broken windows covered with dusty plywood, and a rusted metal door that groaned in the wind. A faded auction sign still leaned crooked against a chain-link fence, reminding everyone that the property had sold for just $2,000. Neighbors slowed their cars to stare. Some shook their heads. Others laughed openly. They couldn't imagine why a 40-year-old single father would spend every dollar he had on what looked like nothing more than a collapsing pile of concrete and steel. Ethan ignored every comment. He stepped out of the truck, smiled softly at his 12-year-old daughter, Lily, and handed her an old brass key. "Want to do the honors?" he asked. Lily's eyes sparkled as she unlocked the stubborn door. It took both of them pushing together before the garage finally opened with a long groan that echoed through the empty building. Dust floated through the morning sunlight, revealing shelves coated in years of neglect, abandoned tools scattered across the floor, and old machinery that most people would have hauled away as junk. Lily wrinkled her nose before grinning. "It's kind of ugly," she admitted. Ethan laughed quietly. Ugly doesn't always mean worthless. Across the street, a sleek black luxury SUV rolled to a stop at a traffic light. Inside sat Victoria Sinclair, the billionaire CEO of Sinclair Holdings, on her way to inspect nearby redevelopment properties. She glanced toward the old garage after hearing the laughter from the crowd. Her assistant looked up from a tablet. "That place sold this morning," he said. $2,000. Probably another bad investment. Victoria studied Ethan for only a few seconds. Instead of arguing with the crowd or trying to defend himself, he simply rolled up his sleeves, picked up a broom, and began sweeping decades of dust from the concrete floor while his daughter worked beside him without complaint. There was something strangely calm about the way he moved, as though he wasn't cleaning an abandoned garage at all, but greeting an old friend. Before the traffic light turned green, Victoria caught herself watching longer than she intended. "Find out who he is," she said quietly. "Just curious?" her assistant asked. Victoria didn't answer immediately. "Something doesn't fit," she finally replied as the SUV disappeared down the street. Hours passed. The laughter faded. The curious neighbors drifted away. Ethan and Lily worked until the afternoon sun poured through broken skylights overhead. Beneath a pile of warped wooden boards near the back wall, Ethan's shovel struck something that didn't sound like concrete. It rang with the unmistakable echo of solid steel. He brushed away decades of dirt until the outline of a heavy rectangular hatch slowly appeared beneath the floor, its edges sealed shut as though someone had wanted the world to forget it had ever existed. Ethan exchanged a silent glance with Lily, neither of them speaking a word as curiosity quietly replaced exhaustion. Ethan knelt beside the steel hatch and ran his fingers along the edges, brushing away years of packed dirt until the outline became unmistakably clear. It was not an ordinary utility cover. Thick bolts had once secured it in place, but time had reduced them to rust. Lily crouched beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you think somebody hid treasure down there?" Ethan smiled without looking up. "Maybe. Or maybe somebody simply wanted whatever is underneath to stay forgotten." Together, they searched the garage until they found an old pry bar leaning behind a broken workbench. It took nearly 20 minutes of steady effort before the seal finally gave way with a deep metallic pop that echoed through the empty building. As the hatch slowly lifted, a rush of cool air escaped from below, carrying the faint scent of machine oil and old paper instead of mold. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. Ethan switched on an old flashlight from his toolbox. The beam revealed concrete steps that looked surprisingly intact despite the decades above them. "Stay close," he told Lily. She nodded confidently, holding onto his sleeve as they descended. At the bottom, the room was much larger than either of them expected. Metal shelves lined the walls, covered with neatly organized boxes that had somehow escaped the worst effects of time. A massive workbench stood in the center, surrounded by unusual mechanical components unlike anything Ethan had seen in an ordinary repair shop. Dust covered everything, yet the room felt carefully designed rather than abandoned in a hurry. Lily picked up a small notebook lying on the bench. "These drawings look complicated," she said. Ethan accepted it gently and turned the pages. Instead of random sketches, he found detailed engineering diagrams, handwritten calculations, and precision measurements. Whoever created them possessed extraordinary technical knowledge. His eyes lingered on several pages longer than expected. Certain ideas felt strangely familiar, almost as though he understood the thinking behind them instinctively. He quietly closed the notebook without saying anything. Upstairs, the afternoon sun continued drifting across the broken skylights while, miles away, Victoria Sinclair finished her property inspections. Her curiosity about the quiet father had not faded. "Did you find anything?" she asked her assistant during the drive back to headquarters. "His name is Ethan Carter," the assistant replied. "Divorced several years ago. Raising his daughter alone. Runs a small mobile repair business. No lawsuits, no debts beyond a modest truck loan, and no unusual financial history." Victoria looked out the window. "That is all. That is all we found." She remained silent for a moment before saying, "Keep an eye on the garage. Do not interfere. I only want updates." Back underground, Ethan noticed a compact machine sitting beneath a protective canvas. Unlike the other equipment, it showed almost no corrosion. Curious, he carefully removed the cover and examined its worn metal housing. Most people would have dismissed it as scrap, but his attention focused immediately on a missing gear assembly and a damaged electrical connection. Without thinking, he began, mentally tracing how the mechanism was meant to operate. Lily watched him carefully. "You know what it does, do not you?" she asked. Ethan paused before answering with a gentle smile. "Not yet, but I think I can figure it out." Neither of them noticed the small brass nameplate attached to the side of the machine, partially hidden beneath decades of dust, waiting for someone to uncover the first clue to why this forgotten garage had never truly been ordinary. The following morning, Ethan arrived before sunrise with a thermos of coffee balanced on the hood of his old pickup, while Lily finished her homework in the passenger seat before school. The garage was still quiet, wrapped in the cool morning air, but Ethan could not stop thinking about the machine hidden beneath the floor. After dropping Lily off at school with a promise that they would continue exploring together that afternoon, he returned to the underground workshop carrying a small toolbox. He carefully cleaned the brass nameplate with a soft cloth until faded letters slowly appeared beneath the dust. The manufacturer's name had long since disappeared, but one line remained surprisingly clear. Prototype number 3. There was no company logo, no patent number, and no date. That alone made Ethan even more curious. He spent the next several hours examining every visible component before locating a cracked electrical connector and a missing drive gear. Neither problem seemed impossible to solve. Using discarded metal from the upstairs garage, he quietly shaped a temporary replacement piece by hand with remarkable precision. His movements were calm and deliberate, as though he had performed similar work countless times before. When everything was finally assembled, he connected a portable battery pack from his truck and paused for a long moment before flipping the switch. The machine responded with a low mechanical hum that grew steadily smoother until several small indicator lights flickered to life for the first time in decades. Ethan immediately disconnected the power, not out of fear, but because he wanted to understand every system before pushing it further. He smiled to himself. Whatever this machine had once been built to do, it had not been forgotten completely. Later that afternoon, Lily hurried down the staircase after school, nearly bouncing with excitement. When she saw the softly glowing indicator lights, her eyes grew wide. "You fixed it already?" she asked. Ethan chuckled. "Only enough to prove it still wants to work." Lily looked around the underground workshop once again before pointing toward a row of dusty filing cabinets against the far wall. Together, they opened drawer after drawer until they discovered carefully organized folders filled with engineering notes, prototype sketches, testing reports, and handwritten observations. Most of the material was highly technical, but one sentence, written neatly across the top of a yellow notebook, caught Ethan's attention. Great inventions belong to those willing to solve ordinary problems extraordinarily well. Ethan quietly repeated the sentence to himself before closing the notebook with thoughtful respect. Across town, Victoria Sinclair received another update from her assistant during a meeting. He has spent almost every hour inside the garage, the assistant reported. No contractors, no demolition crew, no attempt to resell the property. Victoria tapped her pen thoughtfully against the conference table. Interesting, she said. Most investors would already be looking for a quick profit. After the meeting ended, she found herself opening the satellite property map again, her attention drifting back to the tiny forgotten building that should have meant nothing to someone responsible for billion-dollar developments. Back inside the garage, Ethan noticed something else hidden behind the filing cabinets. A large blueprint tube had slipped into a narrow gap between the wall and the shelves. As he carefully pulled it free and unrolled the aging paper across the workbench, his expression changed completely. The drawing was not a design for the machine sitting in front of him. It was an architectural plan showing that the underground workshop extended far beyond the room they had already discovered, ending at a section marked only with 2 handwritten words that instantly deepened the mystery. Final archive. The blueprint occupied nearly the entire workbench, its carefully drawn lines revealing corridors and storage rooms that did not match the dimensions of the building above. Ethan slowly traced the underground layout with his finger until he reached the section labeled Final Archive. There was no explanation, only a narrow passage leading beyond a wall that should not have existed. Lily leaned closer, studying the faded paper. "Do you think there is another room?" she asked. Ethan folded the blueprint carefully before answering. Somebody spent a lot of time hiding this place. There had to be a reason. Rather than rushing forward, he chose patience. Over the next several days, he focused on restoring the garage upstairs. The cracked windows were replaced, the leaking roof was patched, and the old workbenches were repaired instead of discarded. Curious neighbors who had laughed only a week earlier began stopping by with broken lawn mowers, bicycles, and generators. Ethan accepted every job with the same quiet professionalism, charging fair prices and explaining each repair in plain language. Word spread surprisingly fast. Customers returned because their equipment worked better than expected and because Ethan never tried to sell repairs that were unnecessary. Lily proudly organized invoices after school while greeting customers with a warm smile that made the dusty garage feel welcoming. One afternoon, an elderly retired engineer named Walter Benson rolled in an antique bench grinder that several repair shops had declared beyond saving. Ethan examined the worn bearings, listened carefully to the uneven sound of the motor, and disappeared into the workshop. Less than an hour later, the machine purred smoothly, as though it had been manufactured only yesterday. Walter stared in disbelief before running his hand across the polished housing. "Young man," he said quietly, "very few people still repair things this way." Ethan simply smiled. If something was built well, it deserves another chance. Walter nodded with growing respect, but as he glanced around the garage, his eyes suddenly landed on one of the unusual mechanical components resting on a nearby shelf. His expression changed instantly. "Where did you find that?" Ethan answered honestly. "It came with the property." Walter looked at the part for several long seconds before carefully setting it back down. "Take good care of this place," he said before leaving without another explanation. Across the city, Victoria Sinclair reviewed a report that was becoming increasingly unusual. "Customer traffic has tripled since the opening," her assistant explained. "Several local business owners are recommending him." There's also an interesting detail. A retired engineer stayed almost 40 minutes yesterday, but left without asking for repairs. Victoria looked up from the report. "Did he say why?" "No, but surveillance notes suggest he recognized something inside the building." Victoria closed the folder thoughtfully. She had purchased and sold hundreds of commercial properties throughout her career, yet this forgotten garage continued pulling respected professionals toward it without any obvious reason. Instead of sending lawyers or investors, she decided to drive there herself the following afternoon. Meanwhile, Ethan returned to the underground workshop after closing time. Guided by the blueprint, he carefully measured the far concrete wall marked on the drawing. His knuckles tapped gently across the surface until one section answered with a slightly hollow sound. Hidden beneath decades of dust, almost invisible to the eye, was the faint outline of another sealed doorway waiting just beyond the reach of the room they already knew. The hollow sound echoed through the underground workshop long after Ethan lowered his hand from a wall. He measured the distance again, comparing every inch with the faded blueprint until there was no doubt. Another room existed beyond the concrete barrier. Instead of breaking through immediately, he searched for a cleaner solution. Whoever had designed this place had valued precision, and Ethan believed they would have hidden an entrance just as carefully. The next morning, before opening the garage, he studied every detail surrounding the wall. Small scratches near the floor caught his attention, almost invisible beneath. Decades of dust. Kneeling down, he noticed a narrow steel plate disguised as part of the foundation. After carefully removing layers of dirt, a circular mechanical latch emerged. It had not moved in years. Ethan cleaned the mechanism, added a few drops of lubricant, and slowly turned it clockwise. Somewhere inside the wall, a series of gears responded with a quiet metallic rhythm. The concrete section shifted only an inch before stopping, leaving a narrow opening just wide enough to reveal shelves extending into another hidden chamber. Lily arrived after school, just as Ethan gently slid the concealed doorway farther open. She stood frozen with amazement. The second room looked nothing like a storage area. Every shelf had been arranged with remarkable care. Wooden crates carried handwritten labels. Protective cases held carefully wrapped instruments. Rolled blueprints filled entire cabinets. In the center stood another workbench, far cleaner than the first room, as though someone had expected to return one day. Ethan resisted the urge to examine everything at once. Instead, he selected a single sealed notebook resting neatly on the desk. Inside were detailed engineering journals describing years of experiments, failures, improvements, and careful observations. Every page reflected patience instead of ambition. The unknown inventor had been trying to solve practical problems that affected ordinary people, making machines more efficient, more reliable, and easier to maintain. Ethan quietly admired that philosophy. It reminded him why he had fallen in love with engineering years earlier. While exploring one cabinet, Lily discovered a carefully folded envelope addressed simply to whoever finds this workshop. Ethan unfolded the letter with steady hands. The paper had yellowed with age, but the handwriting remained remarkably clear. The message contained no fortune, no legal claim, and no instructions about ownership. Instead, it offered a simple request. Knowledge only has value when it serves others with humility. Ethan read the sentence twice before carefully placing the letter back inside its envelope. Upstairs, business continued growing beyond anything he expected. Customers recommended the garage to friends, local contractors, and small business owners. One afternoon, a regional manufacturing company arrived with a specialized industrial motor that several commercial service centers had failed to repair. Ethan examined the damaged assembly quietly before asking permission to disassemble it completely. Within 2 hours, he identified a tiny alignment defect that had gone unnoticed for months. After machining a simple replacement spacer using equipment from the old garage, the motor ran smoothly again. The company's maintenance supervisor stared at the restored machine in disbelief. 3 engineering firms told us this unit needed replacing, he said. How did you find the problem so quickly? Ethan simply smiled. Machines usually tell you what they need if you take the time to listen. The supervisor left deeply impressed, and by the following morning, news of the remarkable repair had already begun circulating among local manufacturing businesses. At Sinclair Holdings, Victoria received yet another report describing Ethan's growing reputation. This time she closed the folder, stood from her desk, and made a decision without consulting anyone. She would visit the garage herself, not as a billionaire investor, But as a customer who wanted to see with her own eyes whether the quiet man everyone had begun talking about was truly as extraordinary as the story suggested. Victoria Sinclair arrived the following afternoon in a modest gray sedan instead of one of the luxury vehicles from her company fleet. She wanted no attention, no introductions, and certainly no special treatment. The small parking lot was nearly full, with pickup trucks, delivery vans, and family cars waiting outside the once-forgotten garage. She stepped inside, just as Ethan was explaining the inner workings of a portable generator to an elderly customer. His words were simple, patient, and free of technical jargon. He spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who cared more about solving problems than impressing people. When the customer smiled and thanked him, Ethan wished him a safe drive before noticing Victoria standing near the entrance. Their eyes met briefly. She offered a polite smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said. "Not at all," Ethan replied. "What can I help you with?" Victoria gestured toward a small tabletop air purifier resting in the back seat of her car. "It stopped working months ago. Several places told me it was cheaper to replace than repair." Ethan carried the unit onto his workbench and removed the cover with careful hands. He examined each component without rushing, occasionally rotating a small fan blade or checking an electrical connection. Within minutes, he located a tiny cracked capacitor hidden beneath the control board. "The motor is perfectly fine," he explained. "Only one inexpensive component failed. If you are willing to wait about 20 minutes, I think we can save it." Victoria watched quietly as Ethan searched through organized drawers before selecting a compatible replacement from his parts collection. His work was methodical, almost effortless, with every movement guided by experience rather than haste. Lily entered from the office, carrying fresh lemonade for waiting customers, and smiled warmly at Victoria. "My dad fixes things because he believes everything deserves a fair chance," she said proudly. Victoria accepted the drink with genuine gratitude. "He seems to believe that about people too," she replied. Lily nodded without hesitation. "He always has." 20 minutes later, Ethan plugged the purifier into an outlet. The machine started immediately, running more smoothly than it had in years. Victoria looked genuinely surprised. "Every service center told me it could not be repaired," she said. Ethan handed her the receipt. The repair cost was less than $20. She looked from the paperback to Ethan. "You could have charged much more." Ethan shrugged gently. The repair did not require much more. As she prepared to leave, her attention drifted toward a shelf where one of the unusual mechanical assemblies from the underground workshop rested beside ordinary repair parts. Before she could ask about it, an unexpected visitor entered the garage. Walter Benson returned carrying a weathered leather portfolio. His expression brightened when he saw Ethan. "I finally found something I wanted you to have," he said, opening the case to reveal an old engineering journal. "Years ago, I worked with a brilliant inventor who suddenly disappeared from the industry. Some of these sketches remind me of his work." Ethan carefully compared one drawing from Walter's journal with a blueprint from the hidden workshop. The handwriting was unmistakably the same. Walter slowly removed his glasses, visibly astonished. "I do not know how those documents found their way into your garage," he said quietly. "But if my memory is correct, the person who created them was decades ahead of everyone else." Standing only a few feet away, Victoria heard every word. She said nothing, but for the first time, she understood that the quiet father repairing lawn mowers and household appliances was standing at the center of a mystery far greater than an abandoned building. And she left the garage with admiration beginning to replace curiosity. The conversation with Walter stayed in Ethan's mind long after the garage closed for the evening. After Lily finished washing the last coffee mug from the customer waiting area, the two of them returned to the underground workshop, carrying Walter's journal beside the collection they had already discovered. Ethan carefully placed the book side by side across the workbench. The handwriting matched perfectly. The same careful lettering, the same habit of sketching tiny mechanical details in the margins, and the same philosophy appeared again and again throughout the pages. None of the notebooks spoke about becoming rich or famous. Instead, every project focused on making ordinary machines more reliable, more affordable, and easier for everyday families to maintain. Lily quietly read one sentence aloud. The greatest invention is not the one that changes the world overnight. It is the one that quietly improves someone's life every single day. Ethan smiled. That sounds like someone who understood what success really means. As they continued organizing the documents, they discovered a series of unfinished prototype drawings unlike anything they had seen before. Most engineers would have considered them incomplete because several pages ended abruptly without calculations or final dimensions. Ethan studied them for nearly an hour before reaching for a pencil. Without opening a textbook or searching the internet, he began filling in the missing measurements with calm confidence. One solution led naturally to another until the design finally made complete engineering sense. Lily watched in amazement. How do you know where everything goes? Ethan paused for a moment before answering honestly. I did not memorize answers. I try to understand why something was created in the first place. Once you understand the purpose, the missing pieces usually reveal themselves. The following morning, Walter returned carrying several retired colleagues who had spent decades working in advanced manufacturing. None of them mentioned the hidden workshop. Instead, they brought damaged equipment that had resisted countless repair attempts. Ethan welcomed each visitor with the same quiet courtesy he showed every customer. He listened carefully, inspected every machine patiently, and never exaggerated his confidence. By late afternoon, every piece of equipment was operating smoothly again. The retired engineers exchanged astonished glances. One of them finally spoke. "Young man, these repairs were not guesses. You understood the original design better than the people who built these machines." Ethan simply thanked him for the compliment and continued cleaning his workbench. Across town, Victoria found herself thinking less about the abandoned property and more about the man inside it. She requested every publicly available record connected to the land and spent part of the evening reviewing decades of ownership documents. Most transfers were ordinary until she reached records from nearly 40 years earlier. The listed owner was not a corporation or investment group, but a private research foundation that had quietly dissolved without public explanation. There were no lawsuits, no bankruptcy filings, and almost no media coverage. It was as though the organization had intentionally faded from history. Victoria closed the final file and looked out across the city skyline. The garage had never been valuable because of the building itself. Its true value had been hidden beneath the floor all along, waiting for someone with both the knowledge and the character to recognize it. Back inside the workshop, Ethan carefully rolled up another completed blueprint after finishing the missing calculations. As he slid it into its protective tube, a folded sheet of paper slipped from between the pages. It contained only a single handwritten sentence, followed by a street address several states away. The sentence read, "If you have finished what I could not, then you're finally ready to discover why this workshop was built." The address on the folded note belonged to a quiet town in western Pennsylvania, nearly 400 miles from Columbus. Ethan stared at it for several moments before handing the paper to Lily. She read the sentence twice, then looked back at him with the same curiosity shining in her eyes that had filled the garage since the day they unlocked its front door. "Do you think we should go?" she asked. Ethan smiled thoughtfully. "Not because somebody told us to. We will go when we understand why." Rather than leaving immediately, he spent the next several days reviewing every journal and blueprint one more time. Hidden among the technical drawings, he noticed a repeating symbol that appeared only beside projects marked as complete. After comparing dozens of pages, he realized the symbol was not a signature. It was a coordinate system connecting different research notebooks together. One reference led directly to the final prototype they had restored beneath the garage. Another pointed toward the address in Pennsylvania. It was as though the unknown inventor had intentionally created a path that only someone who truly understood the work could follow. Meanwhile, news of Ethan's remarkable repairs continued spreading throughout central Ohio. Owners of small manufacturing companies, family farms, and independent machine shops drove hours simply to ask for his opinion before replacing expensive equipment. Ethan treated every visitor exactly the same, whether they arrived in an old pickup truck or a luxury sedan. He never rushed conversations, never spoke down to anyone, and never accepted praise as though he deserved special recognition. His reputation grew not because he advertised, but because grateful customers shared their experiences with friends and neighbors. One afternoon, Victoria returned to the garage carrying a slim folder instead of a broken appliance. Ethan welcomed her with the same warm smile as before. She placed a folder on the workbench. "I found historical records connected to this property," she said. "Nothing here gives anyone ownership of what you discovered, but it explains that the research foundation which built this place believed innovation should remain accessible to ordinary people." Ethan quietly read the documents before looking up. "That sounds very similar to the journals downstairs." Victoria studied him carefully. "You already knew there was more to this place." Ethan paused for a brief moment before answering honestly. "I knew there was more to learn." Rather than pressing for details, Victoria simply nodded. The answer told her everything she needed to know. This man protected knowledge for the right reasons, not because he wanted power over others. She closed the folder and spoke with quiet sincerity. "If you ever decide these discoveries deserve a larger future, I would like to help. Not because they could become profitable, but because I believe the person who finishes this work should also protect its purpose." Ethan appreciated the offer, but did not answer immediately. He looked across the garage, where Lily was patiently helping an elderly customer carry a repaired toolbox to his truck. "Any future worth building has to begin with people like them," he said softly. Victoria followed his gaze and smiled. For the first time in years, she found herself admiring success measured by character instead of financial statements. That evening, after locking the garage, Ethan packed only a small overnight bag, Walter's journal, and the folded note with the Pennsylvania address. As he turned off the workshop lights, his eyes settled briefly on the restored prototype resting silently beneath the garage. He no longer believed the greatest discovery was hidden inside the machines or the blueprints. The real legacy was the responsibility to use knowledge with humility, and the road waiting beyond that handwritten address might finally reveal who had trusted a stranger to carry that legacy forward. 2 days later, Ethan and Lily arrived at the Pennsylvania address just after sunrise. Instead of finding a large research facility or a wealthy estate, they stood before a quiet brick workshop surrounded by maple trees. A weathered wooden sign above the entrance reads simply, "The Miller Workshop." The building appeared closed, but when Ethan gently knocked, an elderly woman opened the door with a warm smile that suggested she had been expecting someone for a very long time. She introduced herself as Eleanor Miller, the daughter of the engineer whose journals had filled the hidden workshop beneath the garage. Without asking Ethan a single question, she invited him and Lily inside. Every shelf in the modest building displayed practical inventions that had never reached the marketplace, each designed to solve everyday problems rather than generate enormous profits. Eleanor explained that her father had turned down several offers from powerful investors because he believed important technology should improve communities instead of becoming exclusive luxuries. Before his passing, he had hidden his life's work, convinced that only someone with both technical skill and genuine humility would eventually understand it. She smiled gently at Ethan. He believed the right person would repair machines before chasing fortunes. Ethan looked around the workshop in thoughtful silence, realizing that every choice he had made without seeking recognition had quietly led him to this moment. Eleanor then unlocked a simple wooden cabinet containing the final collection of notebooks. There were no hidden deeds, no stock certificates, and no secret fortune waiting inside. Instead, the notebooks completed every unfinished design Ethan had restored over the past several weeks and included one handwritten letter addressed to the future caretaker. Ethan unfolded it carefully. The final page read, "If these pages have reached your hands, then you already understand. That knowledge is only valuable when it creates opportunity for others. Protect these ideas, improve them, teach them freely, And never forget that character is the greatest invention any person can leave behind. Ethan lowered the letter slowly, deeply moved by its quiet wisdom. When they returned to Ohio, he made a decision that surprised nearly everyone. Rather than selling the discoveries or licensing them to the highest bidder, he transformed the old garage into a community innovation workshop where students, young mechanics, veterans, and aspiring engineers could learn practical skills without expensive tuition. Walter volunteered to teach mechanical design. Retired engineers donated equipment. Local businesses contributed materials. The once forgotten building gradually became a place where experience was shared generously and curiosity was encouraged every single day. Several weeks later, Victoria visited once again. This time she arrived carrying architectural drawings instead of business proposals. She placed them on Ethan's workbench with a quiet smile. "I would like Sinclair Holdings to fund the expansion of this workshop," she said. "Not to own it, not to rename it, and not to control it. I simply want more people to have the same opportunity that this place has already given so many." Ethan looked at the plans before extending his hand. "Only if every decision continues serving the community first." Victoria shook his hand without hesitation. "That is exactly why I came back." Over the following year, the restored garage became a respected center for innovation and education, proving that remarkable ideas could grow from the most unexpected places when guided by integrity instead of ambition alone. On the first anniversary of the auction, Lily climbed a ladder and carefully hung a newly painted wooden sign above the entrance. She stepped back, smiled proudly at her father and Victoria, standing together below, and watched neighbors gather outside a building that no one laughed at anymore, because what had once looked like an abandoned garage had become a home where hope, knowledge, and kindness quietly worked side by side every single day.